Hey, good morning. Hey, if you're watching online or you're here in the room, I'm Charlie. Really glad that you are worshiping with us today. And just in case you're wondering, this is not the same shirt I wore last week. Heidi even asked the same question. She's like, is this the same shirt I wore last week? He's like, no, it's a different one. I have plenty of them. Anyway, as long as there's a win streak going with the basketball team, you can be assured that I'm going to be wearing this. Gets to double digits. I'll bring out the red pants again. It'll be a great day for all of us. We're starting a new series today. It's on relationships. And normally, when we do a relationship series, typically around marriages, families, those kinds of things. But, in the fall, we did a class that was on sex and sexuality, which obviously had a significant focus around marriage relationships. And so we're kind of changing it a little bit here and just kind of really talking a lot more just about relationships in general, the way that we love each other, our friendships, just kind of who we are and the way that we just generally interact with everybody. And so just kind of our relationships in a very broad sense. We'll be doing that over the next 5 weeks. I think it's going to be a really good series. Encourage you guys to keep coming back to that. Just talking about what does it really mean to love and how do we love well, and what is it when Jesus says for us to love each other well, what does that mean? And so this question, as I've been thinking about this particular sermon, kind of what's been prepping this for me, the question that's kind of been in my head that I think can kind of set the stage for today, and really I think for the whole series, is when people really get to kind of peek behind the scenes in your life, in your family's lives, in your relationships, what are they really going to see? Now, I think that by and large, we as a church, we're pretty good at not being particularly fake on Sundays. But at the same time, and we're all still just kind of putting on our best face here. I mean, there's your public face of who it is you're trying to be. You're trying to be your best version of yourself when you're out in public, and there's no shame in that. It's not necessarily being fake. But then there's kind of who you are everywhere. It's who you are in private with your family or just your close friends. Like, who are you? What will people see if they got to really peek behind the curtain? Now, in our family in particular, we got our own little quirks our family does. But one of the things that kind of comes up a lot is that and when we're all together for dinner or whatever, there's a lot of pressure to be funny, right? Who gets to be funny? Like, who's getting the most laughs? Who's kind of controlling the laughter kind of deal? Who's telling the best jokes? There's a lot of pressure, and our older girls have talked about this before. It's like, man, sometimes I just feel like all this pressure. I got to be funny, and then I feel like I'm not being very funny and all these things. But then they all said, and then our oldest, Maylee, she was the first one to say it. Said, but I realized something the other day, Dad. Like in my friend group, I'm the funny one. Like I don't ever feel like I'm the funny one here, but my friend group, I'm the funny one. And then Lauren said the same thing. We kind of all realized that that's just kind of what we are. And then I saw this tweet the other day that said, if you talk to your kids with sarcasm, you're going to raise sarcastic kids. And I didn't know if I was supposed to feel embarrassed when I read that. I don't know if I was supposed to feel pride, but I was like, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's what I have. And for those of you guys who are around for this, I mean, Lauren, our middle, she's 21 now. But when there was a time she was running around here. She was just 10, 11, 12 years old, a kid, right? And there's lots of stories like this, but one in particular really kind of sits out. I don't really remember all the details, but I remember it was Cass, our worship pastor. He was talking to Lauren, and I don't remember exactly what it was. She was wearing some shoes or a hat or something like that, and he drew some attention to her and was teasing her about it, the way that you do. Oh, I like your hat, something like that, right? So he goes, oh, yeah, I really like those shoes. Nice shoes. And he goes, nice face. Right? And he's like, man, kids, like, he comes up to me, he's like, most kids kind of giggle, they kind of put their head down. It's like, she cut me. I'm like, yeah, she will cut you. You need to be careful. And some of y'all didn't learn the lesson. Because now there's another one running around. She's 10, right? She's running around. You think, it's a kid. She will cut you. She just will. And I said this, right? And this is second service. You guys don't know. We have an earlier service. I had two people come up to me after the first service, like, yeah, you won't believe this story. And then they tell me this story about something Layla said. I mean, I can't tell that story. But you just got to know. I'm saying, be careful. And so we have a lot of fun. We use a lot of humor. And I hope that if you experience this as a family, you'll just kind of experience. I mean, this is a fun group. I think they love each other well. They enjoy being together. What about you? If I were to follow you around and see what you're like with your family, what you're like with your friends, what you're like in your small group, what you hear on Sunday morning, what would people see? There's a passage that we're going to be looking at today. Jesus is talking to his followers where he's essentially kind of setting up, and you see several different passages like this, where Jesus is kind of setting up for them what he wants them to be about when he's not around. Like the kind of the characteristics, the things that he wants them to be doing, the kind of characteristics that he wants them to have. Hey, you're my followers. This is what I want you to look like. Because here's the deal. For them, for Jesus, for like the disciples, following Jesus was a very literal event. Jesus was here, so I'm here. And now Jesus went over here. And so I followed him over here. And like they followed him. And like I'm gonna go where he goes. And if he's doing something, I'll do it or help him do it. It was very literal. But following Jesus when Jesus isn't here anymore, something very new to them. Again, for those of us here who follow Jesus, I mean, that's all we know. It's kind of following his teachings and trying to live the life he says he wants to live. But for them, it was very literal. So we have these moments where Jesus is like, man, I'm not going to be around forever. And here's what I want you to be about. And we find one of these passages in John chapter 13, starting in verse 31. When he was gone, Jesus said, now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself and will glorify him at once. My children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I tell you now, where I am going, you cannot come. And so maybe there's parts of that are confusing. You may look at that and think maybe really actually all of that is quite confusing. So we have this word glorified, just kind of this, think about glorified as just kind of shining brightly, right? Just internally, externally, just kind of with your character and who you are, just kind of being exalted, worship, just kind of shining in some way. And so Jesus is saying, he's like, because of who I am as the Son of God, and here also kind of referring to himself, Son of Man, which is kind of referencing some prophecies. Basically, it's this Messiah, Son of God figure. I'm glorified, like I kind of shine, and God and the Father kind of recognizes this because of who I am. He kind of shines a little brighter. And there's going to come this time when this is all just going to happen in a big way, because I had to, I don't know, for lack of a better word, kind of repress some of that to kind of just be a regular human here. But when I get back to heaven, there's kind of be just kind of this even bigger shining, this glorification, and it's coming. And so he's essentially, in a fairly, again, a mildly confusing way, he's kind of setting this up. And then he tries to say it something a little more directly in verse 33. He's like, I'm not going to, you guys know I'm not going to be here forever. I'm not going to be here for a little while longer. Jesus knew he was about to die. And I said this to the Jews before, I'm going to say it to you. I'm about to go someplace, and you're not going to be able to follow. So again, he's kind of setting this up like what I said, is like, what's it going to look like for you when you can't literally follow you anymore? And a little bit later, in kind of some dialogue that we're not get to in this passage, they kind of say, man, you can tell they're confused. Yeah, they're just kind of as confused about this sometimes as we are, which I think can be encouraging for us. It's like they were kind of a little confused about what he was saying too. He's like, where are you going? Where are you going? I mean, like, we followed you a lot of places. Where are you going when you think we can't go? And, Jesus trying to get a little more direct with them. Like, where I'm going, like, I'm here, but eventually I'm going to go someplace you can't go. You'll come later. He's still just a lot of death euphemisms here, but essentially he's describing, I'm going to die, and you're going to still be here. And you'll join me later. I'm going to prepare a place for you, and I'll make sure that you get to come be a part of this. But in the meantime, you're going to be here without me. So then his conclusion to this idea, okay, I'm not going to be here. Here's what I need you to be about. Verse 34. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. So you got this phrase that kind of jumps out in a very short period of time. He says it 3 times. See it over and over again. Love one another. Love one another. I want you to love one another. People are going to know you're my disciples if you love one another. I loved you, so you should love one another. He says it over and over again. So that's this idea that we're drawn to. This is what he says. As I have loved you, love one another. This is how people are going to know that you're my disciples, if you love one another. So that's obviously the focal point of what Jesus is trying to communicate to us. We're going to do a little group Bible study here. I'm going to read this again, but there's something else about this command, these 2 verses, that I think that really stand out, and we'll see if we notice it and any of us have the courage to say it out loud. I'll try to even give you a hint. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. There's a particular idea, a particular word in there that really kind of stands out. And honestly, when I look at it, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Anybody catch it? Just one word. New. New? A new command? A new command. Man, like the Bible's full of this, right? In fact, Jesus already told them to love already. In fact, Jesus was asked what the greatest commands in all the Scripture were. And he says, well, that's actually 2. Love the God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. He has said this before. Jesus has given the command to love before. And he says it is, in fact, the second most significant command in all of Scripture. And so then he says, I got a new command for you, love. And you're like, bro, that ain't new. And I think it's important for us as we are reading the Bible, especially when we read stories, we're reading kind of, especially Jesus' teaching, there's always going to be these moments where you're going to be kind of like, okay, that doesn't make sense. Maybe or maybe you hear some stories like, I don't like that. And there's something about it that is a little unsettling or is confusing. And I think we've been trained a little bit to feel bad about that. Like you're not supposed to talk back to the Bible. It's like, it's the Bible. It's the Bible. I can't talk about it. It's the Bible. But honestly, these things that kind of stand out, they're features, not bugs. Not a problem with you. It's a feature. It's a design in his teaching. A new command I give to you. You're expecting him to say something very new, but what he doesn't say is not very new. He's supposed to love. But if he hadn't said that, we probably would have heard what he said is like, hey, love your neighbor as yourself. Just love people. But he's like, a new command I give to you. Now we slow down a little bit. What is it about this? The question you have to ask, what's new? Like what's new about this? I don't know. And so we stop and we slow down. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, you must love one another. By this everyone will know you're my disciples if you love one another. There's a couple of things that I think that are different about this, about the way that he says we should love one another, than maybe the other commands. Something about this that makes this new, that makes it a little fresh. And the first one, I think, is the fact that he uses himself as the example. So Jesus as the example, that's something different about it. It's not just love your neighbor as yourself. It's you as I have loved you, love one another. And so when you think about love your neighbor as yourself, there's something just kind of self-focused about that. Hey, you think about the way that you think about yourself and think about others the same way. Or even the do unto others as you would have them do unto you. There's kind of this, not a selfish kind of love, but kind of a self-interest, self-focused kind of thing where it's like, I think about me, and I think about the way that I love, the way that I want to be loved, and I'm going to try to love that way. But Jesus is saying, let's take you out of it. It's not about you being the best version of you or loving the way that you want to be loved or loving the way that, loving others the way you love yourself. I want you to love people the way that I love people. In fact, I want you to think about the way that I have loved you. And the way that I have loved you, that's how I want you to love each other. So I'm sure in this moment, it gave them some pause. And I'm sure months later, after Jesus' death and his sacrifice that was for everyone, sacrificing his life for them and the torture and what he went through, they're thinking about this. I mean, what does it mean? Like, what does it mean, Jesus, how did Jesus love us? The first word that comes to mind is it was sacrificial. He fully gave of himself. He sacrificed himself. He gave up the things that were very often seemingly in his own best interest, the things that he wanted that would have seemingly been better for him in order to meet the needs of people around him. There was a sacrifice to it. And I think it's important. We see this in Ephesians, we see it in Philippians. As Paul is describing the love of Jesus, this idea of, I'm going to give up the things that I want in order to meet the needs of the people that God has put around me. And when we do that for each other, we're doing the thing that Jesus did. He sacrificed and he's meeting people's needs. When he saw physical needs, he was a healer. He was a feeder of people. He brought water to people. He brought hope to people who were hurting. He met people right where they were. No matter what bad circumstance you find yourself in, you can experience the love of Jesus. There's a love first. Love first, ask questions later. No matter how bad the person was, there was this sacrifice, I want to love you, I want to help you kind of mentality. But also part of the way that Jesus loved you, he was going to love you. You were going to get better. You were just going to get better with Jesus' love around you. This is kind of a thing that I've said from time to time, and it comes up every time we talk about relationships. The difference between a buddy and a friend. Jesus was a friend, not a buddy. What is a buddy? At its simplest, a buddy, you do something stupid, and your buddy goes, right? He laughs, right? He's filming it, right? And he thinks it's hilarious. A friend hears you're about to do something stupid, doesn't pull his phone out and says, don't be an idiot. Don't say that to your wife. Don't do that to your kids. You can't do that at work. You can't act like that. You can't talk like that. You gotta be better than that, bro. That's what friends do. Friends make each other better. Buddies just kind of laugh at one another when we're doing stupid things. But you're around Jesus, you're gonna get better. And so basically what he's saying is, I want you to love in that way. I want you to sacrifice for one another. I want you to meet one another's needs. I want you to help as a community. I want you to get better. And I think this points to the second thing that I think that is new about this command. Jesus is the example, but it's focused on community. This is a plural command, and that matters. It really matters is what he's saying. When I say, love your neighbor as yourself, I'm like, hey, you. You all need to love your neighbor the way that you love yourself. This is an individual command. We can give it collectively. Hey, we're all here. Here's what all of you individually need to do. You need to go out and love your neighbor as yourself. This is a group command. Hey, you, all of you, love one another. This is a community. This is what he is saying that we want to do. These are the type of people that you need to be. This is not about you doing the right thing so that you can be a better person. This is about the type of community that Jesus is wanting us to build. This is who, as his people, he's wanting us to be. We are people who love one another. It is a constant giving. It is a collective thing. And again, what he's about to say next, it's going to be the thing that needs to define us as God's people. And he continues on, he says this, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples. So essentially what we have here is this idea. This is how we will be identified with Jesus. Now, for the next 4 weeks, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what this love looks like. We're going to talk about some of the struggles that we have to love other people well. We're going to talk about some of the more difficult circumstances that we may find ourselves in, where it's more difficult to love somebody. We're talking about how we can kind of overcome those, how we can love people well in bad times, and bad times that happen to them, bad times that they create for themselves. And we just kind of figure out a way to kind of love one another well. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. Jesus kind of set this up here. This is the defining characteristic. Love one another. And so in order for us to really understand that, we need to go deep into that idea. What does Jesus mean by love? What does it mean to love one another? And we're going to do that for 4 weeks. But in this moment, as we kind of set the stage for this series, I think it's important for us to have a moment of reflection about what he's saying right here. This is how people are going to know. Is that a Jesus person or not? Like, I step into their space. I step into their world. I walk into their small group, their Bible study, their Sunday morning meeting, their family, their gathering of friends. They're all hanging out. I step in. I don't even know what's going on here. I step in. I say, wow, that is a lot of love that's happening. Those must be Jesus's people. And so what he's saying is, if you want the world to know that you are associated with me, then they'll know that by the way you love each other. Had an interesting, cool opportunity this week. The family has been a part of our church for quite some time. The Ivies, Britt and Z Ivy, they're moving to California. She's taking another job there. She's taking a job there on Monday, and Z is going to be working with some ministries that help people who are currently struggling with homelessness. And it's a really cool deal, and she was telling me about it. She's really excited and just kind of feels like that we as a church, we've kind of launched them out, which is a really cool deal. And I was at this thing on Wednesday. She works at the CMM, which is this missions organization. I need to pause here for a second and rant about something just briefly. She used to be here on staff at the church as our bookkeeper, our finance director. And what happens is, and this happens all the time, we need to finance somebody to do our finances. It's like, hey, we'll train you. You don't need any experience as long as you kind of, respectable person and understand how to use the computer. We can train you, can do it. And then what happens is they work here for a little bit, and then some other group that can pay real money is looking for an experienced person to do their finances, and boop, they're gone, right? So it happened with Britt. It's happened many times. It's fine. I'm only a little bitter. Anyway, so she's been doing this for the CMM, which is great. We love it. We love what she's doing. Only jokes. And so they're having this thing on Wednesday morning for her to kind of thank her and to kind of to send her off. And they're having this share time, and they're all going around. And I'm telling you, almost every person said, man, we love Britt so much. She's so funny and sarcastic. And the next one, oh, she's funny and sarcastic. She's funny and sarcastic. Funny. Everybody just kept describing her as funny and sarcastic. And I began to think, it's like, she was on our staff for quite a few years. I would have described her as the quiet one. I was like, oh, well, this is just what we send out. Our quiet one is your funny and sarcastic one. That's just kind of our staff vibe, right? You may not feel like the funny and sarcastic one here at the staff meeting, but we launch you out to some others. Hey man, you're funny, sarcastic, right? It's great. It's great. It's kind of who we are. It's kind of, again, it's just, there's a common denominator here between this story I'll tell you about our staff and I'll tell you about our family. You figure it out yourself. So it's like that's a Grove person. That's a Lofton. There's a characteristic. Now, Jesus is saying that there is one characteristic that needs to define us. And when you go out, when you live your life and they see you, they'll know that you're mine. And they'll know that you're mine by the way that you love each other. Now, if this is what Jesus is saying, this is how everyone will know that you're my disciples, if you love one another. We're really only left, I think, with one very, very important question. How are we doing? How are we doing? Jesus says this is going to be the marker to decide whether or not we are Jesus' people or not, by the way that we love each other. How are we doing? That may feel like maybe I'm asking that rhetorically. I'm really not. I mean, I really want this to kind of be a deep, thoughtful moment for us. To ask the question, are we doing, as people who say that we follow Jesus, are we doing a good job of identifying ourselves to the non-Jesus people by the way that we love? And so as you think about this question, I kind of want us to think about it in three different ways. We'll start big and go small. And the first one will be big picture, capital C church, all churches everywhere, Christians as a whole. Christians, you believe that Christians in this world, in this moment, have a reputation with non-Christians as being, man, you hang around them? Man, their love, man, there's just a lot of love there. So much kindness and sacrificial love. You just walk in there, and that is the thing that you feel. Do you believe that is our reputation? Now, maybe it feels a little rhetorical. I think the answer to that question is no. I do not think that that is how we have been defined. I don't think that is what people think of when they think of American Christians, and we have to own our part of that. We can get in our private little groups all we want to and rant about the world and, well, it's a problem. It's a problem the way they're decay and they don't see and no. Show them then. It's your it's our responsibility to show them, but it's not what we're doing. I hear about this way too often. And then finally I'm not trying to be cool by using this word, I saw a meme this week. And it was this group, it was just a people worshiping at church. And basically what it said was, this is the same group of people that in about 30 minutes about to chew out an 18-year-old waitress. And you want to comment on that, right? How dare you say something true out loud? You know, our neighbors here, when I first met with them several years ago to figure out, hey, I noticed you guys are closed on Sunday. Are you guys ever open on Sunday? Because the parking situation. No. We're not. We're closed on Sunday. We'll always be closed on Sunday. Do you want to know why? And I think in that moment, I knew the answer was no, that I didn't want to know why. Because the way she said, you want to know why? Yes. And she was like, because Sunday lunch is the worst. It's the absolute worst. They're horrible tippers, and they're incredibly rude to our staff. Church people trying to serve them in restaurants, it's the worst. And so we got to be closed someday. Might as well be closed on the day where the worst people come. Is it my job to apologize on behalf of the world? I'm so sorry. But this is how we have come to be known. We are not the people who inject love into spaces, in our social media spaces, in our restaurant spaces, in the way that we talk or treat each other. It's like, no, man, we do pretty good in here. In the way that one church talks about another church. One group of Christians talk about a different group of Christians. We are not known for loving each other well. And big picture, we need to own that. Ultimately, we can only own our spot in it, but we need to be aware of that. But let's scale it back a little bit. How are we doing as our church? How do we do at loving one another? We got the thing on the front door. Yeah, right there next to you. Somebody walk in the parking lot that says "You belong." It's a phrase. It's a slogan that is meant to communicate. This is a place where you can come and experience love and connectedness. When people walk in here, is that what they experience? Do we define ourselves well as that? Like someone, I say this all the time, like there's always somebody new. And right now, even in this moment, there is someone here who is at a minimum having only maybe their second or third experience. Some people here probably having their very first experience of what it means to be here. And like, what are these people, what are they like? Is that what they are experiencing? Now, I have the privilege of being at Connections every month where we have new people. And I want to give you guys, we lost a point the first round. I'll give you the point back here in this round. I think we do a pretty good job. I hear a lot from people who are brand new that say that was part of the thing that drew them in. It just seemed like people here seemed real. They seemed authentic. They seemed to really care that I was here. And so I want you to feel good about that, but I also want you to be mindful of it. I want you to be mindful that people are coming here, by the time they make it here into the room, they're looking for something. And they're not wanting us to fail at loving well. They're wanting us to win. But this is our job. This is who we are. We need to let people know that when they're here, this is a place where love exists. We love one another. Just like Jesus, we want you to know. We want you to know we're on Jesus' team by the way that we love each other. But ultimately, we dial it back all the way. How are you doing? Do you feel in the way that you love, do you feel like that you're representing Jesus well? When people see the way that I talk to my friends, when they see the way that I talk to my family, they say the way I interact at work, am I someone who, by the way that I am, I'm showing people that must be a Jesus person? My youth group used to talk about this all the time. You need to live your life in such a way that people know that you are with Jesus. In that context, all it meant was don't go to parties. That's all that meant. And the idea was there that you wouldn't go to parties and people be like, man, there's something very attractive about you. You don't do the fun things that we do. Well, tell us about that. And it never really worked the way they were. So it was really just a ploy to get us to not go to parties. Now, I'm not saying you should go to parties. I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying that you can just live however you want. I don't want to go too far, but I do want to say this. That's not the primary way that Jesus said we were going to be able to identify ourselves as his people, by the things that we don't do. I abstain from certain things. There's some things we need to abstain from. I get that. But Jesus doesn't say, and people will know that you're my disciples by the things that you abstain from. People are going to know that you're my disciples by the way that you love each other. If I want people to be drawn to Jesus because of who I am and what I do, how do I love? How are you doing at this? Because the more of us that say, I'm going to make this a priority for me, I want to love well, then suddenly we're a room full of people who are loving well. And suddenly we can get our big picture reputation back. These are just people who love each other so well that the world can't help but say, those are Jesus' people. Let me pray.